Welcome, everyone. Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars, with another exciting episode. Today we have Andy Paul, who's just written his third book, Sell Without Selling Out. We dive into the conversation. The book brings a perspective, and he's really trying to help sales organizations and corporate America really look at how they've been approaching sales leadership, sales managers. And, it's a $15 billion a year sales training and development business. And the money's really being spent in badly. We're not helping the people that can help the other people. We're making some decisions, and Andy, as usual, calls things out pretty straight on, hits right between the eyes. Some really good information. We have a great conversation. You could get his book on Amazon and a bunch of other places, but Sell Without Selling Out. Go grab a cocktail and a cigar and strap in for another episode. Thank you. So Andy, I truly appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to jump on our little podcast. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
I was excited when my assistant got you scheduled because of your book. What I don't understand is why this book hasn't been written before. You cut right to the chase and talk about all of these things that salespeople have a reputation for, and it's just it seems so obvious, but it's not. To the industry.
Right.
And I love that you wrote it, for starters, but was there anything that prompted you, that really drove you to do this? It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, this is my third book, but this book in particular is just a sense through all the conversations I've had on my podcast and the work I do with companies and so on. It was just that we're not getting any better at B2B selling. And why is that? Given all the advantages of technology that we have and information that we have, why do we still seem to be struggling to, and we see this in the industry reports that come out about declining rates of quota attainment on the part of sellers and declining win rates and so on. It's like, well, why? Why are we stuck here? And the more I looked at it, the more I thought about it, is that because we just seem to be sort of stuck in the past to a large degree in terms of the way that we socialize sellers and train sellers to interact with buyers. And I think, to me, this indication of falling quota attainment and falling win rates is the buyer's referendum on how good a job we're doing. And the vote isn't good.
Well, it's a great point, because the buyer's journey that salespeople are supposed to take them through their sales process, it doesn't represent what the buyer needs. In most cases. Doesn't give them. Because to a large degree, if you're transactional, salespeople are almost irrelevant, because the buyer can find what they need through online information. Yeah, exactly. It's not like in the 50s where we bought a car, we needed that person to give us the information. Now the buyer comes there looking to touch and feel and get that smell of the new car. It's no longer needed. But I think that's a big part of it. But I think the approach of sales development, sales trainers is off. And I think there's a piece that's missed, and I'd love your take on this. With sales management, often we see that they've been left out of the training.
I agree 100%.
And they're supposed to come and help support and coach the salespeople, and they are left out in the dark of what may have been good training or may have been bad training. But the point is, they're left on the outside, and they can't do what they really are supposed to do, and that's support and coach those salespeople.
Well, I think there's two things at play. One is exactly as you said, is that who are arguably the most important people in the whole chain of developing professional salespeople, which is a frontline sales manager, from a mentorship, a coaching, a role modeling. Yeah, they've been left out in the cold. And
Hmm.
LinkedIn reports on their state of sales report, I think the one from last year, the year before, is roughly $15 billion a year spent in the United States on sales training. I would wager that no more than 5% of that, maybe 10% max, is spent on training sales managers. And yet there's just this assumption that goes along. So we give somebody a title, they know what they're doing, right? So, and and you see this, I see this up even further up in the chain, like when I'm talking to chief revenue officers or VPs of sales about work that I can do for them, is their biggest objection is that they're afraid they're going to look bad when they go to get approval for it because, hey, I'm carrying this title. I must know all this, right? I must be this
Mhm.
font of wisdom. And it's like, no, it's it's not the case. And so we underinvest horribly in training and frontline sales managers, put them in impossible positions where today they're, because of the tools that we have, uh, there's much more sort of visibility into what's happening in the process, and senior level management wants to have that reported to them. And so we have this conundrum where not only have we under enabled frontline sales managers, we put demands on them for reporting and other things that are not relevant to improving the performance of the individuals. It's just purely reporting functions. And so then they don't engage in activities enough, like coaching, to help their people
Mhm.
develop. And so we're stuck in this really sort of vicious circle in this regard. And you see
And
this in the surveys with, they survey managers, frontline managers. So how much coaching do you give your team? And they cite a number. And then you ask the sellers how much they're actually receiving. And it's usually the reciprocal of that number, right? So
mhm.
it's like, yeah,
Something's
it's
amiss.
a miss, right? So I think this, it's such a hard job being a frontline manager, and we as a profession, we as senior level managers don't do enough to help them.
Well, the CEOs and the C-suite don't understand how to leverage that, in my opinion, don't understand how to leverage that group, and they put them in a position to fail.
Mhm.
So often that sales manager is there because they were top sales
Right.
producers, top salesperson, and those skill sets are not necessarily the same. They're not the same. Having management competencies and being, the lone wolf out there, killing
Mhm.
it is a different set of skills. And I did a talk the other day, and I told the story about my first time I was asked to be a sales manager. I accepted, right, because he
Sure.
doesn't say yes to a
Yeah, me
promotion.
too.
But on the way home, I was at a Christmas party, and at the way home from that, my wife's like, so this is great, you got a promotion, but have you ever managed salespeople before? And she knew the answer, of course. And I'm like, no. And she's like, have you ever managed anybody
Mhm.
before? Because you just have trouble managing things around the house. And I'm like, no. But it was, to me, it was a challenge that I had to figure it out. I had to get better at it. Most, I think most sales managers get frustrated. They frustrate the senior leadership and the team, and then they go and they take their skills and be a salesperson at your competitor.
Sometimes,
Um,
yeah.
so it's so how do we break that cycle on a larger scale? And your book does a lot to help people understand that the whole the whole process, the whole industry is a miss, or they're off their game, and it needs to be fundamentally shifted. Otherwise, we're going to continue to get worse and worse, and quotas are going to be
Yeah,
missed. Win rates will drop.
right. I somewhat, a little bit of hyperbole. I I propose the scenario, which is, well, let's take this $15 billion, and what if instead of spending 90% of it on training sellers, we spent 90% of it on training sales managers and sales leadership? What do we think the outcome would be? And personally, I think that we would be no worse off than we currently are today, because I think we so much of the dollars that's spent on training sellers is not spent well.
Right.
And if we really believe, which I do, that one of the single most important influences on the development of a individual salesperson are as their immediate manager, help them get better, and then you'll have the impact that you want. Yeah, I guess
Right.
we're so far behind in sales in so many dimensions in terms of looking at how we improve performance. And and yeah, I use the example oftentimes citing what's happening in many professional sports, not all, but many, that have really gotten into very highly specialized roles to help sellers improve.
Mhm.
And in general, I think maybe in the corporate world, but in sales in particular, we're just still in the Stone Age. I'm
Yeah.
a huge soccer fan, and so I always bring up soccer examples as what you look at. Like my favorite soccer team is Liverpool in the Premier League. Uh, they've got. Uh, well, I'm trying to think the right term for it. On their staff, as actually as consultants this year, but they're almost full time. Is they're cognitive improvement experts. They're working on
Mm.
fine motor skills and really detailed training to help people react more quickly to the ball and think more clearly, be in the moment. They have staff psychologists. They have, specific trainers for physical improvement, for nutritional improvement. And I mean, very detailed. Um,
Mhm.
and I just think, gosh, we know there's an issue with stress and burnout and so on in the sales world. We're more aware of it today than we were in the past. And it's like, well, how
Yeah.
many salespeople do you need to have on your team to say, yeah, it'd be worth the cost to have a performance psychologist, on
Well,
staff or available on call for us? Not many, maybe 10. I
right.
mean, it's
Well, but we make that comparison all the time between athletics and sales, and one of the things that I think is the big miss there is athletes expect to be coached. They expect that support that you're talking about,
Mhm.
whether it be nutritional, mental focus, acuity, however we want to look
Right.
at it. But also the skill for their position, skill for their role. They expect that, and the ownership of the team and the coaches and management of the team, they know that's their role. And in corporate, at least here in corporate America, that that's misunderstood. And
Ignore it.
when you start to, yeah, it's ignored. We talked to a VP of sales of a $30 million a year
Right.
company, and like, what's your metrics? What are you looking at? What's your thing that's your driver? Well, we look at revenue and margin. Like, okay, what else are we looking at? Like on a weekly
Mhm.
basis. That's it. And I mean, dug around a lot, and I'm like, that's a lagging indicator there. And this guy's been a VP of sales for longer than the
Mhm.
average, right? He's at 2 years, um, and he just couldn't see that there was, like, you get to that point, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the month, there's nothing you can do about that number now.
Right.
And he was like, well, so, and I'm like, so if there's nothing you can do, how do you help your team get better? How do you
Right.
coach them? And it was just right over his head. And to me, that's indicative of everything that's going on. Like, he has no idea the subtlety of coaching a deal and coaching the individual to figure things out for themselves, which you talk about in the book. It just goes right over their heads, and they don't have any clear mentors to help them know what it's supposed to feel like, and they probably haven't been coached well in their life off
Oh, I'm sure.
the soccer pitch or off the field of play.
Yeah,
um,
it's like, and that's not to be too harsh, but the fact is, as in the more senior ranks of corporate management and sales management, sales leadership, they just don't care enough. And it's like, okay, this is sort of happening and it's sort of good enough. And when we're hitting a shortfall, we're going to just take the brute force approach we've always done in the past, as we're going to lean heavily into discounting and incentives and so on to hit our number, and never really fundamentally address the issue, which is, yeah, we just don't know how to sell. And, and the ball just sort of, or the can just sort of keeps getting kicked down the road. But we're coming to a
And it,
period here, though, with, after 14 years of pretty heady growth throughout the economy, where that appears that's coming to an end, right? We are going to have some sort of setback economically. It seems to be in process already. A high probability of a recession, if not even stagflation, coming up in the next couple of years. If you've just sort of been skating along the surface, and not really paying attention to the points you made about really investing in developing your people, developing your frontline management, who are such a critical layer in there. When push comes to shove here in the next couple of years, it's going to be really tough for a lot of companies that have ignored that.
well, it's a cycle, in my not so humble opinion. 08 and 09, we're going to hit something, I think, a little worse than that, because it's what's happened over the last maybe 9 months, that the pent up demand from, the
Mm-hmm.
shutdown, the pandemic, that that just allowed salespeople to start taking orders,
Right.
and you had supply chain problems, and it didn't matter. It's like, I want it in blue. No, you can't have it in blue. Well, take it in
Mm-hmm.
green. Like, there was that order that just
Right.
kept occurring, and then I've already seen it with the large companies missing their forecast, earnings
Mm-hmm.
forecast, and then what do they always do? They start cutting, they start laying off, and they like, well, we can get rid of salespeople because they're just generating revenue, or they're supposed to be generating revenue. So that's a dumb idea. And then they go and they do the CFO approach of looking at the salesperson's revenue as opposed to their ability to open new accounts and backfill on accounts that they're going to lose. It's a cycle, and I'm already seeing it happen. And it's almost like some of these folks are just like, yeah, I know it's there, but I'm going to just keep not looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's closer to like 2 or 3 months away than it is 6 months away. I hope I'm wrong,
Well,
but if
yeah, I mean, we're starting to see indications already, and certainly in the tech space, there are companies that are cutting staff, and some on the sales side, and just the irony of this is going to be is these companies who aren't very efficient at selling are going to cut people who they think are their least efficient. Sure, that's fine, but they're still not very good themselves. I mean, this is the thing about sort of this great economy we've had in the last n number of years, up to at least the start of the pandemic. But even there's pretty good growth for many companies during the pandemic, was it just covered up a lot of sins. And so we go through a cycle,
mm-hmm,
as you talk about all the time. It's like, all right, what are we going to hit with here? And for me, what I see is certainly a lot of sectors, and I think software is one in particular. It's going to get hit hard because they've been thriving on volume and not really learning how to execute the way they should.
and what's gonna, I 100% agree, and I think that goes across most industries, most sectors. That if you can't sell value, if you can't sit down with a customer and have a quarterly review about, here's the initiatives that we were working on, here's where we are, here's the ROI that came out of these things. If you can't create a trusted advisor, and I know that's a cliche, but if you really can't develop that advisory role, they're not going to fight for you to stay around when they do start cutting
Well,
vendors and suppliers.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, that's,
and
as you know, in so many sectors, especially in the last 10, 15 years, there's been an incredible growth in the number of competitors. Yeah, they start slimming down their supply chains, the number of vendors they want to deal with. It's going to be very difficult. You have to learn not just to sell value, but you also have to learn how to be. You said trusted advisor is cliche. I'm not really sure it's cliche. I think it's really relevant, which is, what are you bringing to the table besides just your product. It's what do you bring in terms of new ideas, new perspectives, new ways of looking at challenges, new ways of looking at outcomes that can be achieved. That's really what buyers want from you these days. They want your questions more
Well,
than your answers.
exactly. It's being able to ask the right questions. Like, what did you do last time that worked? What did you do last time that didn't work? How do we avoid those things? But one of my mentors, Dave Curlin, and he talks about we're this as the salespeople, we're supposed to be the resource.
Hmm.
We're supposed to be that conduit to helping them see that not just the product or the service. It's what are we bringing to the table that's supposed to help them make better decisions and have the right information and challenge them when they walk down a path that may not be the right one.
Yeah,
Um,
or
I,
just challenge them to think more broadly about what it is they're trying to achieve. Yeah, generally agree with Dave on that. I think it's why do there's research that came out during the pandemic saying, look, B2B buyers, they don't want to talk to sellers anymore. And it wasn't very nuanced when this analyst firm was releasing it. And the nuance is that
right,
they don't want to talk to sellers, is they need to, right? The software
right,
organization gets to a point where they know what they know, but they don't know anything beyond that. And what they need sellers
right.
to do is come in and provide those fresh insights, those fresh perspectives, to ask the questions they're not asking themselves because they don't know to ask those questions. And that is the role of an advisor. That's what you're doing. Is you're not trying to necessarily even give them the answers. You're trying to help them see where the answer may be and help them get there.
And to me, it's the way I was taught is I might not be the solution. My my situation, my service, my product, and it's I'm obligated to tell them we're not a good
Mm-hmm.
fit. And but I know that these people might, right, and I know that's not the underlying focus. That should be our last resort. But we're not a fit for everybody, and if we got to figure that out, that's our goal. And that to me, is one of the things that you talk about in the book, and we've used the idea. It's like I don't want to sell. I'm like, great, don't.
Mm-hmm.
Try helping
Right.
people. Have that conversation with some empathy and some skepticism, but curiosity as well, right? You gotta be interested in what these people are doing and care about it a little bit.
Well,
So,
I'm glad you brought up the word
um,
skepticism too, because it's sellers. You're not trying to be, a skeptic necessarily about your buyers, but to your point, it's you just don't accept everything at face value either. And having this relationship with the buyer enables you to sort of dig deeper and get permission to, as I like to call it in the book, is you want to earn the right to stick your nose into your buyer's business.
yep,
Uh,
that's a great turn of phrase because if we're doing our job, we should be able to get that right,
mhm,
ask for that, and be able to poke around a little bit. It's like, why are you doing it that way?
mhm,
And if you do it with the right attitude, with some
right?
empathy, I always bring skepticism. I'm a New Yorker at heart, so I'm used to like, really, it doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
so it's just it's my nature, and if you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're like I said, you're not using your skill set as a weapon, and you're really looking to do good with it, I think you can create opportunity, create wins for your company, yourself, and most importantly, your
Mhm.
customer.
Oh, I agree.
And that should be our goal. So I think that I think your book comes at a point where it's critical that people start to really look at their own belly button and try to figure out what are we doing wrong. And I don't know that there's enough of a there's enough people that care enough about this, but I think they're going to get it's going to come about where if we're not able to be that trusted advisor and provide those solutions, um, the salespeople are going to struggle, and that company is going to struggle if they're not making the right investments in their team.
Agree, 100%. And if we don't give buyers a reason to deal with us, then they'll figure out a way to do it on their own without us.
Yeah, 100%. So I thought it was a great conversation. The sales and cigars. So I want to kind of land here
Sure.
in the end. See if you have a relationship with cigars. If you've ever, it's part of my life. It's part of my daily
Yeah.
life. I
Yeah.
use them to think. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I got exposed to cigars by an older brother who was really into them at an early age. He got into them, like, I think, in college. I just remember he got married, I think when he was about 21, so I was about 16 or 17, and I remember first exposure to cigars being a little rough, as it sometimes is for people.
Yes. My first one was rough. Yes.
It was. I think it was a couple that night, and it was at a wedding reception, and combination of things is like, oh yeah, this is not good. But yeah, I went through a period for a while where I do enjoy it, but I just haven't smoked a cigar in 20 years. But and I think partially due to the fact that unfortunately my brother passed away young and not related to smoking cigars, and yeah, he was always sort of the excuse to do it.
Yeah, but there is a social aspect of it too, right? Where maybe that was a connection with your brother.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to hear he passed, but that's there's certain things, certain people I associate with that because of a golf course and a cigar, or a conversation at a place with a cigar. So I appreciate it. I'm always curious about that. I've had people tell me they've had and one guy told me a story about, he doesn't smoke cigars and he doesn't care for them, but he sat in a bar in California years and years ago, because it was in California, and he smoked a cigar with Joe Cocker.
Oh, that would have been fun.
Which, yeah, interesting story. He had some interesting things to share about that. So
yeah, I have no celebrity stories with cigars, but yeah, that would have been fun to smoke with Joe Cocker.
Yeah, that's a good story. So, again, Indy, I really appreciate it. Best of luck with the tour. I have it finishing that. I'll have that finished up this weekend. So I'm looking forward to it. So
glad you're enjoying it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Sales and Cigars with Walter Crosby of Helix Sales Development. For more on sales and cigars, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Sales and Cigars, produced by thepodcastproshop.com.